Today is October 20th, 2020. The 2020 presidential election now is just 14 days away from today. Exactly 2 weeks from now, which is November 3rd, 2020, aka Election Day, we can finally start to witness concrete results for the Joe Biden versus Donald Trump presidential race, and we can actually start to get a really good idea of who will win this presidential election. Because I've said on this channel many times, I think Joe Biden is strongly favored to win this presidential election. But on November 3rd, we will actually start seeing concrete results that will possibly back up that assertion that I've made numerous times on this channel. Even though Election Day is still 2 weeks away, many people across the country have already casted their vote for president. Many people have either cast their vote for Joe Biden, Donald Trump, or a third party candidate because of mail in ballots. As of now, as I'm recording this on October 20th, around 30 million people have already casted their vote for president because of these mail in ballots. And that is actually a huge amount of voters. 30 million is about 20% of the number of people that voted in the 2016 presidential election. In the 2016 presidential election, in total, approximately 136 million people across the country ended up casting a vote for president, and 20% of that number is around 27 million. So we've already surpassed that mark for this presidential election cycle. We've already surpassed what is 20% of the total 2016 election turnout. And most people are predicting that in this presidential election cycle, more people will turn out than in previous years, such as 2016. One of the reasons would just be that we have more people overall. The population of the United States has consistently increased throughout most of its history. And besides that, there's also the fact that there's a lot more going on this year. This year has been very eventful and mostly for the wrong reasons, but because of that, a lot of people are going to be more motivated to actually turn out and vote for one of the candidates that are running for President of the United States. Another reason why voter turnout is going to be higher this year compared to previous election cycles, and it's the biggest reason why voter turnout as of now in middle of October is so much higher compared to voter turnout by middle of October in 2016. The biggest reason for that is the fact that mail-in ballots are now a really popular thing, and it makes complete sense why that's the case when you realize that there's still a major deadly pandemic that is completely ravaging through the United States. Just last week, just in the past few days, we just hit another spike in terms of the daily case count for this virus. This virus is already taking the lives of over 200,000 people across this country, and it shows no signs of receding anytime soon. Because this pandemic is still very prevalent in the United States, it would make total sense that a lot of people don't feel safe with voting in person. So instead, they vote by mail, they mail in their ballot, and that is the reason why you have over 30 million people who have already casted their vote for president. If it's not over 30 million, it's at least close to 30 million by now. A few days ago, the number was around 27 million, so I would assume by now it would be close to 30 million voters. One of the downsides with mail-in ballots, though, is that compared to normal in-person voting, it's easier for things to go wrong with the mail-in ballots, and it's easier for a mail-in ballot to get invalidated than it is for a normal in-person ballot to get invalidated. And the reason for that is because, one, it's easier for the ballot to get lost, and two, voters in general are more likely to not follow instructions with mail-in ballots than they are for normal in-person ballots. Because a higher percentage of the electorate is voting by mail in this election cycle than any election cycle in the past, this has caused many questions to be raised about what kind of ballots should be counted and what kinds should not be counted. Like, if somebody forgets to fill out this part of the ballot, should it still be counted? Or if the ballots aren't received by this date, should they still be counted? For disputes like these where it's uncertain whether or not certain ballots should be accepted, this is where the judicial branch or the courts step in order to solve these disputes. And we've actually just had a Supreme Court case regarding this issue. The outcome for this Supreme Court case was just decided yesterday, and it concerns the state of Pennsylvania. In short, this Supreme Court decision upheld a law that overall made voting easier in the state of Pennsylvania. So what happened with this Supreme Court case and how it all unfolded was that initially the state of Pennsylvania passed a law that stated that mail-in ballots in the state of Pennsylvania could be accepted up until 3 days after the actual election day without a legible postmark. So this would mean that mail-in ballots sent in the state of Pennsylvania without a legible postmark, they could be accepted up until November 6th, 2020, because that is 3 days after Election Day. Election Day is November 3rd, 3 days after that is November 6th. So this law was passed, but then Republicans in the state of Pennsylvania, were not happy with this law. They thought that that was too lenient with the ballots. They thought that only ballots received by election day should be counted in the total vote count in the state of Pennsylvania. So then this went to the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court ended up deciding this case on whether or not mail-in ballots received up until 3 days after election day in the state of Pennsylvania should still count in the total vote count for the state of Pennsylvania. And the Supreme Court decided that yes, that those ballots that get received up until 3 days after the actual election day, they should still count in the total vote count for the state of Pennsylvania. This Supreme Court case was a very important one and a very notable one for many different reasons. The first reason is because it took place in the state of Pennsylvania. The state of Pennsylvania is a swing state in this presidential election. It's a toss-up state, which means that this state will be a state that both candidates will try to win over. Both candidates will put a lot of resources into trying to win, because this is a state that both candidates need badly to win if they want to win the entire presidential election. Pennsylvania is a state that could go to either Joe Biden or Donald Trump realistically. In the 2016 presidential election, Donald Trump was narrowly able to win the state of Pennsylvania instead of Hillary Clinton. But in the 2020 presidential election, all the polls show that Biden has a much better chance of winning the state than Donald Trump does. It is also highly likely that Pennsylvania will decide who wins the election, meaning that whoever wins the state of Pennsylvania will win the entire election. If Joe Biden wins the state of Pennsylvania, he will likely win the entire presidential election. But if Donald Trump wins the state of Pennsylvania, then Donald Trump will likely win the entire 2020 presidential election. In 2016, Donald Trump was narrowly able to win the state of Pennsylvania, and that was one of the crucial states that he needed in order to win the entire presidential election. Because Hillary Clinton was expected to win the state of Pennsylvania, but she ended up losing that state. Donald Trump won that state. He won two other states in the Rust Belt, and he narrowly became president of the United States. So this is a state that is very crucial for this presidential election, in that both candidates need it if they want to become president. With states like California or states like Wyoming, neither candidate really has to pay much attention to those states, because they already know that California is going to vote for a Democrat, Wyoming is going to vote for a Republican. But with states like Pennsylvania, it could go either way. It could go either for Trump or for Biden. So both candidates have to put a lot of effort into winning those states, because it's a state that both candidates need badly. The second reason why this was a very notable case was because of the fact that this Supreme Court case actually ended in a 4-4 tie initially. So all three of the Supreme Court justices that were nominated by a Democratic president, so Breyer, Sonia Sotomayor, and Elena Kagan, all three of them voted to extend the deadline for 3 more days. And besides those three justices appointed by a Democratic president, the more liberal justices, Justice John Roberts also joined those three. So four of them voted to extend the deadline, while the other four voted to not extend the deadline. So you had a 4-4 split. Usually this doesn't happen because there's supposed to be 9 justices on the Supreme Court. But because of the death of Ruth Bader Ginsburg that just occurred a month ago, and nobody has filled that seat yet, nobody has filled that vacancy yet, neither Donald Trump nor Joe Biden has. Because of that, you have 8 members in the Supreme Court. And because 8 is an even number, you're going to have cases where there's a 4-4 tie, where neither side of the issue gets a majority of the votes. And this turned out to be one of those cases. And if there is a 4-4 tie in the Supreme Court, or if there's just a tie in the Supreme Court, the decision is then sent to the lower courts to decide. And I guess in this instance, the lower court decided to extend the deadline for those 3 days. So the lower court actually sided with the more liberal justices in this scenario. They sided with the 3 liberal justices plus John Roberts. The thing with John Roberts is that even though he was nominated by George W. Bush, a Republican president, even though he is not as liberal as the Democratic nominated Supreme Court justices, he does side with the liberal justice from time to time. He does side with Breyer, Sotomayor, and Kagan from time to time. So he is what is known, I guess, as more of a swing justice. He doesn't always vote with the conservatives. Sometimes he sides with the liberals also. So I guess in this instance, he decided to side with the liberals, and as a result, you had a 4-4 tie that had to be resolved by the lower courts, and the lower courts sided with the liberals in this instance. So why this is such a big issue is that the winner of the 2020 presidential election could potentially be determined by an 8-person Supreme Court. This all just unfolded at the exact wrong time. You had the death of Supreme Court Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg take place, and as a result, you have an 8-person Supreme Court. And when there's an 8-person Supreme Court, that can result in a lot of ties. And there could definitely be a tie in the Supreme Court that has to be sent to the lower courts that will decide whether or not Donald Trump wins or whether or not Joe Biden wins. And that'll be an absolutely devastating scenario because in 2000, the situation came down to the Supreme Court, and back then there were 9 Supreme Court justices. I can only imagine how controversial it would be if the Supreme Court had to decide the election, but there were only 8 justices at the time, and when there's 8 justices, there's a 4-4 tie, then it gets sent to the lower courts. I can only imagine how controversial it would be, this whole situation, if the Supreme Court justices decided in a 4-4 tie, one way or the other, and then that had to be sent to the lower courts. This is all just unfolding at the exact wrong time, but hopefully there's not any issue that has to be resolved by the Supreme Court. Hopefully we know within a couple days of actual election day who won the presidential election. Hopefully we don't have a 2000 election scenario with Bush v. Gore where it took over 4 weeks to actually decide who won that election. The Supreme Court had to step in and decide who won that election. They had to decide that they couldn't recount the votes in Florida anymore because there was not enough time left. The margin was so small in Florida between Bush and Gore. Bush had like just 500 more votes than Gore, 537 to be exact, more votes than Gore in that state. So Gore demanded recounts to be done, and he had some recounts done, but by the time it became middle of December, the Supreme Court justices decided then. They decided in a Supreme Court decision in December of 2000 that there was not enough time left to do another recount before the actual election, the Electoral College election, and because of that, Bush was given the presidential election. He was determined to be the winner of the election. I'm just worried that something like this will happen now in 2020 when you've already had a terrible year for a lot of people. A lot of people are going to be angry no matter who wins this election. So just having a situation like that where it's not known for days or even weeks who won this election and the Supreme Court has to step in to decide the winner, that is not going to sit well with a lot of people. I can already tell. And I just hope that does not happen. But we just have to see. Nothing is out of the picture. Just remember that. 2020 has taught us anything. It's that nothing is out of the picture.